Good evening, everybody. My name is Peter Schimpf. I'm the chair of the Department of Music at MSU Denver. I want to welcome you to our series, the Spring 2021 Music, Race, and Social Justice Virtual Visiting Artist Series, presented by the MSU Denver Department of Music with support from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. This event is part of a year-long series that's highlighting the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color musicians, performers, and scholars. Tonight we have a very special conversation with composer and trumpeter Terence Blanchard, moderated by Dr. Liz Macy, followed by a roundtable discussion examining music and activism in the jazz world, which featured guests Janae Kendrick, Shane Ensley, and Iman Alexander. We're also joined today by Jeremy Van Hooser, Diversity Coordinator in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, who's producing this event tonight. This evening is a collaboration with the 2021 MSU Denver Virtual Jazz Celebration and the 38th Annual Black World Conference, sponsored by the MSU Denver Department of Africana Studies. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. As we gather here today, we honor and acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho nations. This area was also the site of trade, hunting, gathering, and healing for many other Native American nations: the Lakota, Ute, Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, Shoshone, and others. We recognize the indigenous peoples as the original stewards of the land, water, the plants, and animals who called this place home. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties that these nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. Let us acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory. We respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. We pay our respect to them and give thanks to all tribal nations and the ancestors of this place. We also want to recognize the community and families of Auraria displaced by the creation of this campus for MSU Denver to have a place that we now call home. Now I'd like to introduce Don Clement, Assistant Professor and Director of Jazz Studies in the Department of Music. Don?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mr. Blanchard, for being here. And thank you, Janae Kendrick, Shane Ensley, and Iman Alexander. We are just so excited to be presenting our first virtual music at the MSU Denver Jazz Festival this week, celebrating jazz art and education in the heart of downtown Denver. We have performances featuring some of Colorado's finest musicians with bands led by Anisha Rush and Monique Brooks Roberts, as well as special guest artists Kneebody, Sage, and Michael Mayo. And this exciting event, a collaboration with the Music, Race, and Social Justice Series and the Black World Conference. So now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Liz Macy, Assistant Professor of Ethnomusicology.
Thank you, Don. I had to unmute myself. Sorry, everyone. My name is Liz Macy. I am, as Don said, Assistant Professor of Ethnomusicology. And I really want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for this collaborative event and this conversation that we're going to have about music and activism with Terence Blanchard and with our guests. I will be moderating this evening's discussion, and I welcome all questions and thoughts from you guys in the chat or in the Q&A. We'd like to open this up for your input as well. So this series on music, race, and social justice is something that I began developing amidst our pivot online in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and building on our department Black Lives Matter statement. I began the work of organizing this year-long series with the goal of highlighting the voices of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, musicians, performers, and scholars. And the aim of the series is to provide students, staff, faculty, and community members an opportunity to interact with visiting artists through performances and talks that are accompanied by moderated discussions. My hope in doing this is to provide an inclusive space for conversations as we begin the work of decentering whiteness and engaging music and activism in our department and across the university. This fall, the series hosted New York-based Puerto Rican singer, filmmaker, and activist Taina Asili, Ensley and Sarah Overton of the Dream Unfinished, an activist orchestra in New York, Nancy Mendez and Dr. Alexandro de Hernandez of Los Angeles-based Jarocho punk band Aparato, musician, photographer, and author Bruce Sunpai Barnes, and raptivist Aisha Fukushima to the virtual series. And then we kicked off this spring 2021 Music, Race, and Social Justice series with hip hop artist, producer, activist, and scholar Olmeca earlier this month. And this evening, I'm thrilled to welcome Oscar nominee, 6-time Grammy winner, and 2018 USA Fellow trumpeter composer, Terence Blanchard. Terence has been a consistent artistic force for making powerful musical statements concerning painful American tragedies, past and present. From his expansive work composing the scores for Spike Lee films, ranging from the documentary When the Levees Broke, about Blanchard's hometown of New Orleans during the devastation from Hurricane Katrina, to the epic Malcolm X, and the latest Lee film, Da 5 Bloods, which was released by Netflix on June 12th. Blanchard has interwoven melodies that created strong backdrops to human stories. Blanchard received an Oscar nomination for his original score for Spike Lee's Black Klansman. He was also BAFTA nominated for his original music for the film, and he won a Grammy for Best Instrumental Composition for writing Blut und Boden, Blood and Soil, a track for Black Klansman. More recently, Blanchard has composed his second opera, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, based on the memoir of celebrated writer and the New York Times columnist Charles Blow. The libretto was written by Casey Lemons and commissioned by Opera Theater of St. Louis, where it premiered in June 2019. The New York Times has called Blanchard's opera inspiring, subtly powerful, and a bold, affecting adaptation of Charles Blow's work. And the Metropolitan Opera will premiere Fire Shut Up in My Bones on September 27th, 2021, to open their 2021-2022 season in New York, making it the first opera composed by an African-American composer to premiere at the Met. Blanchard's first opera, Champion, also premiered to critical acclaim in 2013 at OTSL and starred Denise Graves with a libretto from Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Christopher. Regarding his consistent attachment to artistic works of conscience, Blanchard confesses, quote, "You get to a certain age when you ask, who's going to stand up and speak out for us? Then you look around and realize that the James Baldwins, Muhammad Alis, and Dr. Kings are no longer here, and begin to understand that it falls on you. I'm not trying to say I'm here to try to correct the whole thing. I'm just trying to speak the truth." In that regard, he cites unimpeachable inspirations, Max Roach with his Freedom Now suite, John Coltrane playing Alabama, even Louis Armstrong talking about what was going on with his people anytime he was interviewed. Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, who live by their Buddhist philosophy and try to expand the consciousness of their communities. I'm standing on all of their shoulders. How dare I come through this life having had the blessings of meeting those men and not take away any of that. Like anybody else, I'd like to play feel-good music, but sometimes my music is about the reality of where we are. And so we're so pleased to welcome Terence this evening to this conversation and to be joining us as well, especially the day after what I can only imagine was a very strange, as he's put it, and very out of the ordinary Mardi Gras. We're pleased to have you here. We're going to begin with Terence, and then we're going to turn to our roundtable discussions about halfway through this evening. I welcome your questions in the chat and Q&A, like I said. And as we begin here, I want to just say to Terence that, you know, I began developing this series, and your name came to mind for so many reasons for me, in part because I have conducted my own research in New Orleans, but also because in a more recent sense, as I was thinking through the themes of the series, I grew up in Minnesota, and I attended J.J. Hill Elementary School, which is the school that Philando Castile worked at when he was fatally shot during a traffic stop. And I know that your 2018 album with the E Collective was dedicated to ending gun violence, and that it was in part recorded at the Dakota, a jazz club that I also frequented for a long period of time. My brother was a bar back there for years and years. So perhaps you could begin by telling us a little about yourself and your journey as a musician, a composer, an educator, and an activist.
Well, first of all, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here to talk to you guys. But, I actually played at that elementary school. We worked with the kids. And, I think the thing that blew me away about that was when I looked at the room full of those young minds and souls, it was full of kids from all different walks of life. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And I kept saying to myself, only if the cop would have known this, if only if he would have seen this and knew that this is who this guy was, And what really broke our hearts was one guy who worked at the school. He just came up to us and he personalized it just by a simple statement. He said, "Man, Phil was a cool dude," and that really just woke me up to the realities of what we're living in. For me, music has always been a thing to try to help heal my soul. I didn't realize that, early on when I was a kid. I just knew that music was something that kind of took away the pain of trying to figure out who I am and where I'm going to go in life, you know, and being around certain educators like Ellis Marcellus, Roger Dickerson, Kid Jordan, and a bunch of others in my early days here in New Orleans. Those were all guys of conscience. And it's one of the things we always talked about. Roger, who's my composition teacher, he's the guy that really taught me everything. He used to ask me questions all the time. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? You know, how do you see yourself? How do you see your music impacting the world? Things like that when I was 16 years old, you know, questions I was like, man, who is this dude? But, you know, but later on, those questions proved to be a very powerful seed that was planted in my brain. And then luckily, you know, I got a chance to play with some great musicians once I left New Orleans. I played with Lionel Hampton at first, where I met a bunch of guys like Curtis Fuller, Frankie Dunlap, great jazz musicians. And then after that, I played with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers for 4 years, where that really kind of gave me my education about the not only music, but the business of jazz as well. And then just from there, I've just been on a journey of trying to better myself, not only as an artist, but also as a person, and trying to create music that's going to help other people heal. You know, when you talk about the album that we did live after the first album, which was Breathless, that's what that entire album was about. And as a matter of fact, I'll just tell you this little short story about it. We went to 3 cities. We went to Minneapolis, we went to Cleveland. We also recorded in Dallas, where we had serious instances of gun violence. And while we were in Cleveland, this guy had come up to me. And you got to remember, I just put the E-Collector together. So I was getting a lot of comments about, man, I really missed your jazz band. This is nice, but I really wish you were doing the thing you were doing before. I was being bombarded with those kind of comments and conversations. So this guy walks up to me and he says, man, I was really expecting to hear the music from A Tale of God's Will. And I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. And he kept saying, he said, I really love that album because the album was really an inspirational thing. The melodies were really beautiful. He said, but the music that you were playing tonight just sounded angry. He said, but then you told us what the music was about, you know, dealing with gun violence, trying to become more aware of gun violence and ending the cycle of gun violence that this country has been in. And then he said, which was really profound for me, he said, then I had to think, if the guy who created A Tale of God's Will is this upset about what's happening in our country with gun violence, he said, maybe I should rethink my position on gun control. And that was a powerful statement, which inspired me and made me realize once again the power of music. And it's one of the things when I'm teaching, I'm talking to kids, I try to make them aware of the power they hold in their hands by putting melodies and chords and rhythms together that can affect people in such a way that could really touch them in a way sometimes that words can't, you know. So that's just been my life. I've been blessed. I've been working with some great people and working on some great projects, you know, and I'm looking forward to doing more. I'm working on some stuff right now with some great people that I can't really talk about, but, you know, the journey continues.
Thank you. I think that, you know, it is. I think that the journey that we all take is such an interesting thing to contemplate. And there's a comment that showed up just in the chat a minute ago saying to ask you about Mo Better Blues and working with Denzel Washington, but really about the quote from the movie that says, our people don't listen to our music anymore. And I wonder if that's something that you'd like to reflect on at all.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, Wayne Shorter said it best. You know, he said, we're taught not to listen to jazz because, you know, we hear jazz piped in, you know, the air through at the mall or different other places. Or sometimes when you're at a club and there isn't live music, they'll play jazz. So people have this inherent thing of thinking about talking through the music, which is kind of an interesting scenario. I didn't realize it until Wayne was talking about it. But it is true that sometimes we can't really appreciate what has been created in our own country. Now, I'll say this, I think some of it has turned around a little bit because you wouldn't have these young artists who are popping up all over the place if that weren't the case, you know, so I feel blessed about that. But at the same time, we can't narrow the scope of who we are, you know, as a culture, you know, as an American culture. And sometimes, you know, I was working with a hip hop artist one time, and he made the comment about it's not a good thing for him to be seen hanging out with a jazz musician. And I went, really? Okay, you know, but that's how he felt, and I thought that was really unfortunate because I remember being in Europe, you know, when I was with Art Blakey, and I was hanging out with Margaret Miller, and we were someplace, and the radio was playing just over the air, and we heard all different types of African American music. We heard R&B and soul. We actually heard classical music as well, and then we heard jazz, all coming from one station. And we kept saying, see, this is where we should be in our country, where we appreciate music, where we're not creating these divisions by having these categories and all of these other things, but really appreciating what people have to offer and bring to the table.
And it's so intriguing to me. And it's one of the things I'm teaching a class right now where we've been talking about some of these exact kind of issues. And one of the things that we've been focusing in on in class is what Mark Anthony Neal terms the Black public sphere, and thinking about the ways that that especially in the United States, that African Americans coming out of slavery had to sort of convene and create these covert spaces and these more safe spaces for making music, right? And for producing music. And I think that sort of brings me to thinking about some of these questions, because I've formulated a number of questions that I might ask you, but one of them that was at the forefront and that I find really monumental, and in fact, one of our roundtable panelists who will be on later referenced earlier today, was this Metropolitan Opera premiere that you're going to be doing. And as the first African-American composer to have an opera performed at the Met in its 136-year history, right? That this is monumental in so many ways. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit and how that came about and what your thoughts are on this huge sort of shift that the Met is taking, right? Especially in this moment.
Well, I mean, it was a huge honor. Peter Gill, who runs the Met, we've been friends for a number of years. He actually used to run Sony Classical, and we had a mutual friend, my mentor in the film business, Miles Goodman. And when Miles passed, I remember Peter called me up and he says, you know, I think Miles would want us to work together. So he actually signed me to Sony Classical to make jazz records for him. So I made about 2 or 3 records for him. And then he moved over to the Met, and, you know, I would see him periodically. And when Champion was premiered in St. Louis, Paul Cremo, who works at the Met, came to view it. And they loved the opera. They just didn't think it was big enough for their stage. And when we did Fire Shut Up in My Bones, they were really excited about it. And they figured out a way to premiere it at the Met. And Peter called me. And, you know, it's one of those moments that's kind of surreal. You know, when he called me and said, hey, man, I think we want to do your opera here at the Met. And I was like, cool, you know, but what else do you say? You know, I mean, it's the Met. So I was really excited about it. I was overwhelmed by it because my father, I grew up in a household where my father loved opera. So if he was around, you know, he would really, really, really enjoy the whole notion of seeing his son premiere work at the Met. But it wasn't until maybe a couple of hours, I think after the announcement, I was doing an interview and a journalist asked me, what do you feel about being the first African-American to have a production go at the Met? And I was stunned because I didn't think that was the case. And I still have, you know, mixed emotions about it, you know, because while I think it's great that Peter and those guys are trying to really broaden, you know, the perspective of what happens at the Met, the thing that I constantly deal with and not struggle with, but just have to be aware of is that while I'm the first, and this has been my comment all the time, while I'm the first, I'm not the first who was worthy, you know, of the opportunity. And I understand that. So by understanding that, I'm working hard to make sure that I show respect to all of the guys who could have been at the Met, you know, and should have been at the Met, you know. And I know everybody else who's going to be a part of the production feels the same way. You know, when we did Champion here in New Orleans, you know, we were faced with some resistance from some of the oligarchs. You know, some of them didn't come to the production and didn't release their tickets to be sold. So some of the front seats were kind of empty, you know. But the idea that motivated the entire cast and orchestra to give probably one of the most amazing performances of that opera, to the point where even the principals were in tears during the curtain calls, you know, because they understand that this is much bigger than us as individuals. You know, we are representing an entire culture, you know, and that's the thing that I tell those singers. You know, I say I grew up in the church, you know, hearing beautiful voices all the time that should have been premiered at some opera company but didn't get the opportunity to do so, you know, but they had all of the talent, you know, and all of the expression to do that, you know. So we take all of these things seriously. It's not just a performance of a musical work. It's not just that. It's much more than that. It's much bigger than that. It's about broadening people's consciousness about who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I think that said so well. And, you know, I'm constantly thinking about these sorts of things and thinking about programming and these other types of things and the things that I teach, and even, you know, coming down to the who I'm teaching, who are the scholars that I'm using in my classes. As someone who sort of straddles the worlds of performance and education, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how universities and colleges can start to engage these kinds of discussions, right? Bring people this kind of awareness. What does it mean to be an activist educator? Or is that something that we should be talking about?
Of course, it's something we should be talking about, because you know, right now, you know, my students that I'm teaching now at UCLA, I'm telling them to be conscious and to really monitor their own emotional well-being going through this pandemic. You know, I said, because this is your time. Don't think that there is some other time that's going to magically appear in front of you. No, everything that you're struggling with and everything that you're dealing with, probably most of the country is going through the exact same thing. And if you base what it is that you create off of a notion of trying to heal those things within your soul, I'm willing to bet that you will touch a lot of other souls. And I think it's always important for us when we're teaching is to teach with a purpose. You know, so I'm teaching kids how to compose and how to arrange, but I'm not teaching them to say, oh, I want you to be able to write the most complex rhythm, or to deal with some really dense harmony. No, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do is to get them to connect all of these tools that would allow them to take the kernel of an idea and blow it up into a big work, but understand that that kernel of an idea came with a purpose. You know, it's not just about a collection of notes and rhythms, you know. And that's the way that I was taught from the time that I started studying with certain people here in New Orleans. And when it comes to education, I think that's what we need to do, because sometimes in education, one of the things that I think has been the default of education is to step people through the process like a cookie cutter. You know, it's like, okay, you know, your first semester, your first year, this is what you're going to do. Second year, this is what you study. And then when they graduate, we say, okay, go out and be an artist, you know? And my thing is like, no, everybody learns differently. You know, everybody's going to have something else, a different way to attack these things and perceive these things. So as educators, we need to be really aware of that and try to make sure that we keep these young minds inspired, you know, and then show them. Because the thing that I've seen is that when you connect music to a purpose for young artists, man, some of them like come alive, you know, some of them really come alive. And I've had moments that have been really emotional with certain students when they dig deep to create a piece of music that's healing themselves, you know, and you start to see it when they will perform it in class. It'll touch everybody else in the class, as opposed to, I know some students want to do the hippest thing or what they perceive to be the hip thing, and then it just falls flat because it's not coming from a place of honesty.
Yeah, we've got our VP for Diversity and Inclusion, Dr. Michael Benitez, in the comments saying that's the truth. When you connect with music with a purpose, it hits the spirit in a really special way, which I think also speaks to one of the things that I was interested to ask you about. And that's, I read in a Village Voice article from 2018 when you referenced the collective's first album, Breathless, and that's in reference to that Eric Garner's refrain, "I Can't Breathe." And you're quoted as saying that, quote, "We can't make a feel-good record now. Let's play how we really feel." And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit and how your music reflects how you're feeling, and how you were sort of moved into that place.
Well, we were moved into that place because initially when I put the E Collective together, we wanted to inspire some young kids who may not have come down the path of listening to jazz. We wanted to inspire them to play instruments, you know, because we felt like that was one of the things that started to dwindle a little bit, the interest of young people playing instruments. And I thought about it. I remember Prince was doing the same thing. He did all these 23 concerts in LA. And I went to one of the concerts when he was doing a double bill with Cassandra Wilson. And I remember him talking about it during the show. He said, "Do you get it? Real musicians playing real music." So that was the thing that we started to think about and when putting the E Collective together. But while we were on tour, we did a tour of Europe to try to work on the music and work on the concept before we actually would record. And while we were in Europe, man, Mike Brown was shot. I mean, if you remember that period, it seemed like there was a period of like every 2 months, somebody was being shot by the police. And we just realized, like, man, we just can't, with all of this going on, we can't do a feel-good record. No disrespect to Bobby McFerrin, but we couldn't do like "Don't Worry, Be Happy" kind of thing. You know what I mean? And we started to think about, well, what is it that we want to say? And we just started to be honest about what it is that we were feeling, the rage that we were feeling, the hurt and the pain, you know? And then for me, the notion of creating something that can take people's anger and frustrations away from them so they won't do anything inappropriate to further blow up this whole idea of people being in harm's way. You know, I brought my son in, who's a songwriter and a poet, and he did I think 2 or 3 songs for us that we recorded. And then I let the guys, you know, in the band write their own things, and I wrote some things too. And we just literally just started to pull it together. And then my daughter, Sydney, she was the one that came up with the name for the record because, you know, she came up with the name for 2 tunes. There was a tune called Cosmic Warriors, like a heavy metal kind of thing. She walked in the room and she goes, "Daddy, it sounds like a warrior." And I went, "Oh, okay, there you go." And then when I was trying to find the name for the record, she said, "Why don't you call it Breathless?" And now she's our own songwriter, doing her own thing. So, you know, we tried to create music that was conscious. We tried to create music. And the thing that was really beautiful about it, when we started, like I was telling you earlier, when we started playing the music around the world and just started touring it, man, we were getting like very strong reactions to what was going on with the music. And we felt like with the second record, which is the record called Live, we couldn't abandon the concept. So we went back in and really just stuck to our guns about trying to create a conversation around gun violence, because at that time, the news were covering tweets every day, all day long. But at the same time, there was this culture of gun violence that was just running rampant and just out of control. And, you know, we just felt like we needed to try to steer the conversation back towards that.
No, thank you. I think that is such a salient thing to think about. I think one of the questions that I'm interested in personally is sort of how, for you, was there like a turning point that you started to see shifting your own ideas about how, you know, to present yourself, how to present your music, how to present yourself as an activist in this way, related to your performance in particular?
Oh, I was Hurricane Katrina, you know. I'd always written music that I deemed to be conscious music, but something about that moment in time where I kept looking at people on screen who looked like me, who were being called refugees, you know, people who were stuck on roofs. You know, one of my mom's friends who came back to see his home for the first time, and he got out of his car, saw his home, and had a heart attack and died right there. Another friend of mine, his father lost his life because he was in the Superdome, was diabetic, and couldn't receive any insulin, you know? And it's one of those things where you say to yourself, something has to happen. And I'll never forget, we were doing the film Inside Man, and I had gone out to LA, brought my family out to LA, and I couldn't find my mom for 2 weeks, but when I found her, I brought her out to LA. And Spike normally flies me to New York to work on the film, but he said, no, I'm gonna come to you, you stay with your family. And when he walked in the door, the first thing he said was, I'm gonna do a documentary on those levees, and we're gonna give those people a chance to speak. And I was really proud of him at that moment. And then once we finished that project, and by the way, HBO gave us money to do a 2-hour documentary, but we felt like the story was so important. We all worked for free to make it a 4-hour documentary because it was just that important. And going through that experience was probably one of the things that helped turn my head around about my own activism. You know, it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do? What is your statement going to be? And that's when I started to do A Tale of God's Will. And as a matter of fact, we didn't even know what the title of that record was going to be. But once we were in the studio, somebody started chanting, this is a tale of God's will. It just came about. And it was one of those things that was kind of like out of our hands, you know. Some of the arrangements are based on stories, true stories that people, the second composition is called Levees. It's based on a story of an elderly man that I saw, oddly enough, at Baskin and Robbins in New Orleans. We were trying to just have a moment of normalcy because we still didn't have street traffic lights. There were a lot of, the military was still all over the place, and we just took our kids to Baskin Robbins just to get some ice cream and then feel normal. And this guy was standing there, and he was a bass player that I didn't know. He was in his 70s, and he told me how he was stuck on a roof for 5 days with 2 other women who were in their 70s. And he told me how that sun was beating down on them, and the water was right up to the roof line, and he saw a canoe, and the 70-some-year-old man got in the water, swam, brought that canoe back, and took his belt off and tied it to the gutter so the canoe wouldn't go anywhere. And he gave the women something level to sit in while they waited and screamed for people as the helicopters would fly over. They would scream at them every day. So when you listen to the arrangement, the first part of the thing is the waves of the water, and then the idea of the trumpet and sax solo being, you know, really gregarious, I guess, if you will. You know, that's the whole idea of them screaming for their lives. But think about that, being stuck on a roof for 5 days in America. You know, it's something I get a little angry about it every time I start to think about it, because, you know, these guys come around and they kiss your ass for a vote, you know, and when it's time for us to need them, we can't find them. And here's the thing that I just want to say this. Here's the thing that's like really important about that. Couldn't find the politicians, right? But in terms of just human beings, there weren't any red or blue states at that time. I'm here to tell you, there weren't. You know, people were trying to help. People were trying to do anything they could to help people in need. As a matter of fact, I had driven to Atlanta with my wife, my kids, my niece, and another friend. We had a car and a truck, and I was gonna go to LA. So I left my truck with my niece and my car, I put it there. But before I was gonna do all of that, I got them serviced at this service station. And when I handed the guy my driver's license and my credit card, he said, man, you're from New Orleans? I said, yeah. He said, hold on for a second. And he went in the back and came back and gave me a receipt with a 0 balance. He said, we can't do much, but we can do this. That's what everyday people were doing. Politicians were the ones who are dividing us with all of these notions about how different we are. But I'm here to tell you, man, when that thing happened, I saw the goodness of most of just about everybody that I came in contact with, during that time. So that's another reason why I said, it's time for us for people of conscience to really band together and try to make a shift and a change out here, because there's evil out here, man, that exists. And if not checked, it'll run rampant.
And thank you. I mean, I thought, When the Levees Broke was such an effective documentary in what it did. As someone who worked in New Orleans, and a lot of my work focused on New Orleans post-Katrina and recovery of terrorism, including, I've got one of my former students who's in the audience here, who took a class that I taught that was on music, race, and class in post-Katrina New Orleans. And I think that it's really such a compelling thing to think about the power that music can convey in that sense. And that, the soundtrack for that documentary was so compelling. And
thank you.
Such a inspiring thing in a sense, in the midst of this deep, deep tragedy, right? And I can see how that could inspire you towards this more activist side of things. We have a question in the Q&A from Dr. Wright in our Africana studies, saying that when he hears John Coltrane's A Love Supreme and similar records from that time, he hears or feels a kind of rage that you're talking about, that you've been talking about. And he's wondering if there are any classic jazz records or artists that you had in mind when recording this very conscious activist music.
Well, the interesting thing about it, I really appreciate that question, because therein lies the whole idea of being an artist. While I was influenced by all of those guys, when creating A Tale of God's Will, the whole idea was, well, what is it that I want to say? I've studied, trained Miles, Clifford, Dizzy, Wayne Shorter, Ornette Coleman, the list is endless. But the thing that stuck out to me about all of those guys that I really love and could really appreciate is that they all found their own voice. They were all comfortable with being themselves, and that was another turning point in my career, where I started to feel, and it's interesting that he used the word rage, because when we were recording that album, I kept saying with every tune and every take, I said, man, I'm sounding angry. But this is what was going on with me. I was so upset looking at the news, trying to get my kids in school in LA at the same time that the president was bragging about what was going on in terms of kids being registered into schools. It was the first time I literally tried to call CNN. I had it on speed. I kept hitting the button. I kept hitting the redial button. I'm like, no. Somebody has to set this record straight. I mean, because, we were running into crazy obstacles. People was saying we got to consult our lawyers and all of this crazy nonsense. And here's the thing about that. When I got to put this in perspective, when we were going through that, even with that, we felt like we were the lucky ones. We felt like we were blessed, because there were so many people going through much worse. My mom left and I couldn't find her. My uncle's a minister, so he went and stayed with another friend of his who's a minister, stayed at a church in Mississippi, but the power went out there and, I couldn't find my mom for 2 weeks. She was sleeping on the floor of a church, and still she was one of the blessed ones because she had a warm place to stay. And you say to yourself, man, this is America. How could this happen in America? And you're going to tell me that the Army Corps of Engineers can't be held accountable for not really building those levees to withhold that type of pressure? Really? Somebody has to pay. If it were me, I'd be in jail. I'd be in handcuffs if I was the one responsible and didn't take care of my job. So the hypocrisy of the entire situation was the thing that really kind of forced us into activism. It forced us to try to say something, no matter how small or how slight. We felt like we had to do something because, if God has given me this little bitty platform of playing music, and being a jazz musician, then I can't just go out here and forsake all of these things that I'm seeing in front of my eyes. I have to say something about it and hopefully bring attention to it to kind of help people heal and help people move on. You know, and after we did that record, we did another record right after it called Choices, where we enlisted the help of Dr. Cornell West to talk about some of these topics, you know, because the whole idea of our choices is, you know, okay, let's admit that we made some bad choices in our leadership that caused us to be in this predicament. But now we moving forward, we need to be more active. We need to be proactive. And, you know, we're starting to see that again, you know, just across the country, you know, in terms of what's going on in our country. And it's at a point now where we better wake up and understand that we can't sit on the sidelines. You know, you have to make your voice heard. You have to stand up for what's right.
Thank you. I mean, I think I totally agree that idea of like, we are responsible. We have to be activists, right? We have to be there. And that leads to one of the questions that's in our chat where Putu, one of our affiliate faculty members, is asking if you've run across ineffective or bad activism. In fact, have you seen examples of this, or is every effort an effort?
I don't want to call it bad activism, but I think sometimes there's unaware. Some people are not truly organized. I mean, because most of the people that I run into, they have great intentions, you know, but you know that old saying, you know, about the road to hell, you know, but I haven't run into a lot of that, thankfully, you know. Maybe that's because of my agent who's over there at Michael Fox, protecting me from some of those things. But most of the people, like, you know, Robin Hickman in Minneapolis, you know, when I played there, man, she grabbed me by the hand, and she was the one that brought me to the elementary school. She took me to the area where Philander was shot. She brought me all over Minneapolis, man, and introduced me to a bunch of people. And I met this other brother who ran this organization called the Ujamaa Men that had like a 95% success rate of like rehabilitating our youth. And I thought it was such a brilliant thing. He had me come and speak to some of these kids, you know, who were dealing with certain issues and confronting law enforcement. But man, it's one of those things where you say to yourself, by the grace of God, there go I. You know, because I'm talking to these young men, and they are not men who we need to throw away. They're intelligent, compassionate people who have felt like nobody has been behind them, like nobody has had their back. And when I saw them in a situation with these guys, there was, you know, fundamental stuff, showing them how to dress for job interviews, you know, working on their educational skills, just all of these things, a well-rounded program. These guys were thriving. And it was only because somebody took the time to tell them, you can do this, and then show them how. That's really it. And the reason why I say by the grace of God, I know that I'm the same way. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, right? And the wild part about the middle-class neighborhood was it was a new development. And it was at a point where people who were moving from bad neighborhoods to better their lives moved into that neighborhood. So the kids, the parents had great aspirations, but the kids, some of the kids, they were still being involved in those activities. So sometimes I'd come out of my house in a middle-class neighborhood and dudes were gambling on the corner. As a matter of fact, you know, I came out my house one time, man, and the cops came from all different directions, and you know, and all of those guys ran off. But me and two of my other buddies, we were walking because we didn't do nothing wrong. You know, the cops pull us over and question us, and people coming outside and seeing us. And the thing is, I'm only saying that to say that, you know, you have to have people in your life to help you navigate situations, you know, because trust me, I knew the drug dealers in the neighborhood, you know, they were driving nice cars. It looked attractive to me too, as a kid, you know, but it was because of my upbringing. It was because of not only my mom and my dad, but everybody else in the community that allowed me to see, no, that's not the path for me. And that's the thing that I think we forget sometimes. You know, we go off into our own and little areas, and now with this device that we're using right now, the computer, a lot of people can just stay in their own world and create their own world. But I think we really need to engage each other and support each other and help each other understand the goodness that we can offer the community and the world.
No, thank you. I'd love to ask, I want to ask one more question, and then I want to bring in our roundtable, our other guests who are here today. But I want to talk about your film scoring also, because this is such a huge part. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the films and your collaborative work with Spike Lee that's now spanned several decades, right? And it's been going for a while. If you could tell me how this partnership began, and how does this work speak to your own direct work as an activist, right? Because clearly this is intertwined, so intertwined.
Well, I'm only laughing because last year, or was it 2 years ago, when we were nominated for Black Klansman, Barry Alexander Brown, who's the editor of Spike, and myself, we were being interviewed by this guy. And the guy asked a question. He said, "What is it like to be working together for 30 years?" And we went, 30? Oh, damn, it's been 30 years, you know? We never really realized it. It started, though, years ago when a guy named Harold Vick wanted to put together a band for Spike's father, who was scoring the pictures. He wanted to put together a band of the best jazz musicians in New York, young and old. And I'll never forget, I had done School Days, I had done Do the Right Thing, and we were doing Mo Better Blues. And with Mo Better Blues, we had to record the music before they shot the scenes, you know, so we were doing that, and we took a break. And at the same time, I was getting ready to make my first solo recording for Columbia Records. It was just my name, Terence Blanchard. And I was sitting at the piano playing this tune that I had written for the kids who were massacred in South Africa. It's called Sing Soweto. And Spike walked by and he heard it. He goes, "Man, what is that? I like it." And I said, it was just something where he says, writing. He says, "Can we use it?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure." So we initially recorded it just as a solo trumpet piece. And then later on, he asked me if I could write a string arrangement for it. And, you know, I did. And when I got to the studio, I handed his father the score, and his father said, "No, you wrote it, you conducted." And I went, "Wow, okay." So then I'm standing in front of an orchestra, waving my hands, trying to remember my lessons from when I was in high school, 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to remember the positions. And then Spike came up to me afterwards, and he just, you know, he was very complimentary about what I had done. And I thought he was just being nice. But then he called me to do Jungle Fever, you know, and even when he called me to do Jungle Fever, I knew that he was doing Malcolm X, but I felt like that project was such a big project. He would go out and get like a big name composer, but no, he didn't. He said, "Listen, man, you know, we're going to do Malcolm X." So I literally started studying scores. You know, I went back to the Rite of Spring, you know, Stravinsky. I went back to even Bartok string quartets, Debussy. I started looking at all of those things. And then I started watching film scores and studying those things as well, because I felt like, you know, if I'm going to do this film, I knew the film was going to be huge. My whole thing about it was, I know I'm competing in a world where there are staff of writers, and this is just going to be me. So I better up my game. And it's been that way with Spike with every film. You know, we just did a couple of interviews together, and I was telling the journalists there, I said, "Man, one of the things about working with Spike is like, there's, and excuse my language, but there's an oh shit moment, you know, because, you know, he'll give me the film, he'll send me the script, and I'll read the script and I know the story. But when he sends me the movie and I actually see it, I go, oh my goodness, okay, everybody's done their work, and now it's my time." The same thing just happened with The Five Bloods. When he sent it to me, I looked at Delroy Lindo's performance and thought it was just like off the chain. This he's one of my heroes. So it's been an inspiring thing of working with him. You're working with Spike. He's working on a documentary right now, and I can't wait to see that.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
We're gonna continue along these lines, but I want to introduce our other guests that we have here this evening. We're also happy to welcome 3 artists, musicians. I'll introduce them as we go and bring them into the conversation here. First up, we have Shane Ensley, not for any other reason that I can see his face on my little screens and boxes. And Shane is faculty here at MSU Denver, trumpeter, drummer, and an avant-garde jazz and post-rock leaning musician who finds work across a broad spectrum of musical styles, from folk to free improvisation. Born in Denver, Ensley studied trumpet, percussion, and composition at the Eastman School of Music. And after graduating, he found work performing with several name artists, including singer-songwriter Ani DeFranco and saxophonist Steve Coleman. Ensley is a founding member of the post-rock jazz outfit Kneebody, who performed or held a masterclass earlier as part of our jazz celebration, all of whose members met while attending Eastman, and has appeared on several albums with the ensemble, including the group's 2005 studio debut on trumpeter Dave Douglas's Greenleaf label and Grammy-nominated album 12 Songs by Charles Ives. Yes, sorry, reading off my script here. Ensley released his debut solo album, Second Guest, in 2002 on When End Music. And in 2011, he returned with Then the Other on Low Electrical Records. In 2007, Downbeat magazine picked Ensley as one of the top 25 trumpeters of his generation. Welcome, Shane. Thank you. Next, I want to welcome Emmanuel Alexander. Emmanuel Alexander is a multi-instrumentalist, performer, teacher, and producer based out of Aurora, Colorado, and a graduate of MSU Denver in spring 2020. At the age of 7, he began taking piano lessons, and by the time he had reached high school, he was playing guitar, alto saxophone, drums, percussion, and bass. And in 2012, he was awarded the Louis Armstrong Jazz Award for drums, which led him to pursue jazz studies at the collegiate level. He completed his Bachelor's of Music degree with a concentration in guitar as a Dale Bruning Jazz and Improvised Music Endowed Scholarship recipient at MSU Denver here with us in May 2020. And he is an active member of the Denver music scene, playing guitar, bass, synth at the Colorado Christian Fellowship Church in Aurora, and performing in various Denver-based groups, including Caitlin Williams, Jamie Stone, Kayla Marquet, I might have said that wrong, excuse me if I did, Mahule, and Ramon PC. And in summer of 2019, he toured the West Coast with Caitlin Williams' band. Thank you, man. And then our final guest this evening is Janae Kendrick, who you know, Terence, because she was one of your students, which is so wonderful. And Janae is a Grammy-nominated vocalist, composer, arranger, and multi-instrumentalist, born and raised in San Diego, California. She received a Bachelor of Music from Western Michigan University in 2005 and attended the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, graduating with an artist's diploma and a master's degree in jazz studies from Loyola University in 2009. And while there, she had the opportunity to work with many outstanding musicians, including Mr. Blanchard, Wayne Shorter, and Herbie Hancock, among others. Janae has performed at festivals, concert halls, and jazz clubs with artists including Nicholas Payton, Ellis Marsalis, Sean Jones, and John Ellis, and with her own band as well. And she performs her own original compositions, as well as fresh interpretations of beloved jazz and blues compositions. She focuses on graceful renditions of jazz standards and composes music and lyrics, where she often accompanies herself on harmonium, violin, viola, and percussion. A dedicated educator, Janae resides in Seattle, Washington, where she serves as an associate professor of jazz voice at Cornish College of the Arts. And in a little plug for our jazz celebration, Janae performs with Grammy-nominated vocal group Sage, who will be featured tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. as part of our virtual jazz celebration. So I'm thrilled to have all of you now here on screen with me. We're moving into Brady Bunch territory. And I'd love to turn it over and ask some questions. We even have one in the comments that I'll bring up in just a moment. As a reminder, you are all welcome to put comments and questions in the chat in the Q&A. And we'd like to share these and circulate these. But before we do any of that, I'd love just to maybe go around with Shane and Iman and Janae and invite you each to share a little bit about yourselves as performing musicians, and how you individually find ways to engage with activism in your own ways, whatever that might be. If there's one of you, Shane, you're unmuted. Maybe I'll begin with you, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's been a big shift for me, becoming a lot more politically active or community or socially active in the last few years. I guess for me, the election of Donald Trump was a real lightning bolt for me, and kind of, I don't know, it's just something I didn't expect at all. I guess none of us did, but it kind of has put such a heavy weight on me, as I know it has for all of us. And it was just such a deep disappointment that our country would be making that choice, and it revealed a lot. And all the experiences these last few years, like hearing so many more stories from African-American musicians and friends that I've known for a long time, and stories I never heard before. And so it's been like a really big, like few years, like heavy few years, kind of realizing a lot more about the truth of what life can really be like here in America. And yeah, so I mean, things have kind of changed for me. Like in our group Kneebody, like the song title started to change, and we started to, you know, try and like have discussions, you know, like just kind of speak to what's going on in the country and the shows, and which felt like just kind of new territory for us, because I guess for me, music was always something I was just doing for me to make myself really happy. And all of a sudden it was kind of, you know, taking on a bit of a new meaning. And so, yeah, I'm kind of had a fire lit under me, and I think it's going to kind of last for a long time at this point. And so for me, I try and make some kind of, you know, moment in any show now to kind of, you know, talk about what's going on and try and, you know, say something that hopefully would be uplifting or good. And then I just try and do more work in my own life. Like I work for an arts organization here that organizes like educational outreach stuff, and usually that would go to schools and work with kids in band programs. And I've been trying to just branch that out. I started like a drumming program at the youth detention center, youth services center here in our neighborhood. Just take like some djembes and cajones and go play with those kids, and then going to try and, you know, raise money to turn that into like an employment opportunity for them, where they can get, you know, trained how to, you know, play the instruments more, and then come work with us as youth mentors. And we're trying to extend that to like a urban peak, which is a youth homelessness center here, and just trying to connect with more, I don't know, I guess community leaders, and see like what I can do to help and like be a good ally, and just be I think like what Mr. Blanchard was saying is just like, it just seems like it's so important for people of conscience to bond and band together and just make sure that things are moving in the right direction, because it's clearly can go in the wrong direction, like a whirlwind for me, it felt like. So I guess that's for me. I just feel like in these last few years, it's really just been such a new chapter in our life as a country, and my life as an artist, and trying to really learn how to be a good activist and good artist. And that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Shane. Maybe I'll pass it up. I'm just going to move sort of thematically. Man, I wonder if you could comment on that as well, as especially a coming up musician, right? A young musician entering the world as well.
Yeah, I kind of like Shane. I mean, I started school at MSU in 2016, and I wasn't even in my first band until 2017. That's when I started playing out, performing more. I would say that I wasn't really as confident in myself playing until like the later years of my education, and that's really kind of helped me, kind of, especially like when all of those shootings were happening. I still felt like it was happening all around me, and I was just sitting behind the screen, and I'm like, I don't know what, it hurts me, you know, but it's like, how do I, okay, so now comes the question on like, okay, how do I take that and use it through this God-given gift that, you know, of music. And as soon as that happened, or that spark, or when that was happening, it just felt, I just felt like the need that of me studying, you know, this Black American music of jazz. It really, it felt natural, you know. I'm so honored to be able to learn from so many teachers and musicians like Don Clement, Shane Ensley, Ron Miles, Don Byron. So many artists and musicians from MSU have helped me kind of like initiate that spark and that activism for sure in me. I would say that recently, I feel like, well, before the pandemic hit and everything, I was playing out a lot, and I would always get, you know, reactions from a lot of people, especially when I'm just playing, and then they come out, they're like, wow, man, that was like, they really enjoyed it. And, you know, I'm like, yeah, thank you, you know, and they're always like, no, thank you, you know. And I think that this music, I mean, I know that I've touched so many people just performing and just being in the person that I am, just, you know, humble. And I always strive to choose love, you know, in this world, because it's, you know, it really is, it's hard for a lot of people, especially Black musicians, you know. in Colorado, there's kind of, I'm trying to find, there's like little droplets of Black musicians, but those droplets and those gems, trying to cultivate that and trying to play with more Black musicians and be just honest in what we do or what we perform, I think is very important. So I think I listened to jazz ever since I was born. My dad, he had all the records. I was born in New York, but quickly flew out to Colorado, and so I grew up in Colorado mainly. But I think a part of that, part of myself, like that is, you know, the Black in me. Wasn't really involved as much as I am now, and I think it's really, I mean, even preparing for this, I did so much research, and I was just really excited, you know, to talk and be able to use my voice, you know, in a positive way. And I really appreciate Don Clement, especially for, you know, or for you guys, you know, having me on here. And I think as a young musician just starting to move, it's been really a really cool journey, and I'm really honored to like be able to be here and just kind of what's the word? I'm excited for the future because I really think that the change, like, it's happening. You know, there's a revolution that is happening right now, and to be a part of that is very, very cool. So yeah.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you so much. And, you know, I think part of us wanting to have you here was having that younger, really emerging voice speaking, which is so important. And, you know, we can see how the trajectory, as Shane mentioned, as Terence is talking about, right, that this movement through this generational shift, and also just this time shift that we're in right now, where things are happening so rapidly. And we're, you know, 4 years ago, I think it was a different world, right? 30 years ago, it was a different world. Janae, maybe you could touch on this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. When did my activism present itself? I suppose, to be completely honest, I have traditionally, I was a very, I'm going to say, self-full musician and performer. I was writing music about my life and the things that I felt and boys and, you know, I don't know, just frivolous nothing. That meant everything to me at the time. But that was at a time when I was able to be young and live in my little bubble, this weird sheltered bubble that I had created for myself. But as life went on, you know, the world seemed to feel like it was bubbling up, and more of the crimes against Black people were in our faces. And so that was the first thing. And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, the world is a scary, crazy place for people of color. That's a truth. And it was so in my face and so on me and so heavy. And my instinct, there's the fight, flight, freeze. There's another one in there somewhere. And I think it's the one where you want to just like completely disappear. And that's my vibe. And so for quite a while, it just kind of consumed me. And then it got worse because I was teaching, I created a Black music history course, which I thought would feel wonderful. But teaching music history, you got to talk about the history. And when you start talking about the history in this country, you don't want to talk about anything. I'm going to be very careful because I have a very foul mouth and the S word almost came out, but I'm going to work on it. Especially when I talk about this, I get real fired up. So teaching that Black music history course, and just kind of like having conversations with my students who knew nothing about this history. And then the fact that this is all still happening, it kind of gets me. And so then that was all I could think about. And then I was pregnant with twins, and I was like praying to God, like, if you're going to give me little chocolate boys, give me the strength and the courage to live in this world, in this country, and parent them. And then I'm thinking, I shouldn't have to pray like that. That shouldn't be the prayer that I send up to God. I'd like to spend my energy just praying for everyone and the good of everyone. Instead, I have to pray for the humans that I'm carrying. And so I wrote a song about that. And then, you know, I'm thinking, honestly, this has been my life for a long time. I have a brother who's serving a life sentence in prison, and he's been in prison for 24 years at this point. And we're not going to get into the way the prison systems are set up and how it's basically just like funnel those Black men in. I won't even go there. But, you know, just I think I realized that I was not, like, I had created this bubble. I was living my own little world. It was not real, and it wasn't any better than feeling and acknowledging all of the pain. So then I took it to the space of, you know, writing. I wrote a song called Never You Mind, which I recorded on my album, and it's basically dedicated to, it's a tribute to the Black Lives Matter movement. And at the end, I say a list of names, and it's the Black men that have been, Black men and women, excuse me, I'm sorry, Black men and women who have been murdered by the police. And I love the song. I have a love-hate relationship with the song, because the problem is that that list is getting longer and longer and longer still. And the issue is, in order for me to respect these lives and send this message to the ancestors, I have to watch the news and grab my computer and find that document and add those names. And this is something that I need to stop. So basically, it got to a point where I couldn't, as much as I wanted to just like curl into my little ball and just try not to feel all the shit that I had to feel, there came a breaking point where there was nothing else that I could do besides saying the truth about what's happening. And the interesting thing is that I have conversations on stage. Like when I'm on stage, I'm just like, we're talking, y'all my people. And sometimes you wind up in a city where I'm singing Never You Mind, and I'm saying those names, and I knew they did not want to be hearing it. And someone came up to me after the fact and said, no one in here wanted to hear that song, but everybody in here needed to hear that song. And so this is kind of the thing that has been fueling me, has been motivating me to be intentional about the repertoire. I mean, I don't consider myself to be the like quickest, like I'm ready to spar and like go back and forth and debate with folks. I don't feel like that is my ministry. But I do, I consider myself to be mindful and thoughtful and incredibly honest. And so it's just always my intention to be as honest in the music that I'm writing. And also, it's really important for me to leave that space for improvisation and creation of like new musical life, kind of representing the loss there as well. So I don't know if that is that an answer?
No, thank you so much. I mean, I think the power and you know, putting that to voice is difficult, and from all of you, like the vulnerability of expressing and talking about these things. You know, I have a poster that hangs on my wall in my office that I haven't seen in months, and I'm starting to miss it, that just says the work continues. And I think that speaks to so much, right? That there's trauma around these, and the work continues, and it's a continuous cycle, and it brings up emotions, and it's tied into all kinds of things. And to voice these things, we have to really be conscientious. It's a constant struggle, right? You know, all of those things are so very carefully linked. And that brings me to one of the questions that's in the chat, which I think that we are all the four of you are really in a place to talk about from different perspectives and in different ways. And that's from Roger Green, who wrote asking this question, saying, one of the things that Mr. Blanchard mentioned was that idea that the experience across genres in music, that you've experienced this and that you critique that sort of cookie cutter program that exists, and the necessity of finding one's voice is really important. In your experience as educators, or the educated even, do you guys have any advice or thoughts for those who might be interested in how we can decolonize our curriculum models, and whether the fact that these curriculum models often very tacitly or explicitly uphold genre distinctions, designations, and might be segregationist, are built on these sort of structural racism issues and things like that. And I wonder if I'm opening it up to anyone who'd like to respond or has some thoughts on that.
I mean, I definitely have thoughts about that, because that's been my life's mission. I think what we have to do is teach the fundamentals of music and composition. Those things are fundamental to any style of music that you write. I don't care what direction you go into. But the most important thing is that when a student comes to you with an idea that may not fit what it is you're working on, don't just throw that idea away. I've had students, I had one kid at Berkeley, he was Korean, and then I found out that he really was into Korean spiritually based music, and he was a drummer. And we really started to investigate that. I had other kids who were more into like maybe some hip hop and not jazz. And one of them right now, he's working with a bunch of people producing records, and what I had a lot of you guys know who Leonel Lewicki is. Leonel came to the program. What am I going to do? Sit down and tell him to listen to Wes Montgomery? No, you know what I mean? No, I'm going to sit down and try to figure out what it is that he's feeling, what it is that he's hearing, what it is that he has to say, and help him find a way to do that. I think all too often, sometimes education has run amok where it becomes an ego battle between do it my way or don't do it at all. And that's not what education should be about, because the educator can learn just as much as the student, and that has always been the thing that I've loved about education. I've learned from my students, they've opened my eyes to things. And I think you have to keep your heart and your mind open to that, to be able to help them further their craft.
Actually, I have a question, if I could keep Terence talking. What about, was your sort of education and mentorship growing up, was it like that? Or did you have people that are always kind of cultivating your individual voice, or was that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Roger Dickinson, man, was my composition teacher, and somebody I had John A. study with too. But he was a person that, listen, man, okay, I'll put it to you this way. I studied with Roger Dickinson, who was a guy that went to Austria and studied classical composition, right? His best friend was Ellis Marcellus, right? Who's a jazz pianist, right? And then there was Kid Jordan, who was an avant-garde guy, right? None of those guys told us not to study with either one of them. None of them. They never did that. We all appreciated what everybody brought to the table. That in itself, coupled along with the fact that I'm going on into New Orleans in the French Quarter, hearing these guys playing this very traditional jazz, while I'm going home listening to Miles Davis, and I'm hearing the connection between the two. So for me, from the beginning, jazz was about a personal expression. You had to figure out what it is you had to say. That was the thing, you know what I mean? For me, from the time that I was a little kid. And Roger Dickinson, when I lost it in the hurricane, and I'm sorry that I lost it, man, but when I was 15 or 16 years old, he made me write a piano concerto that was an atonal concerto based off of a 6-note tone roll, right? And he made me not only compose it, he made me write it out on the parchment paper. He made me do all the calligraphy and everything, when I was 16. That was a hell of an exercise, and it took me out of the mindset of thinking 2-5-1 rhythm changes or that kind of thing. It broadened my thinking about what musical phrases and ideas was about. right? And at the same time that I'm doing that, man, I'm watching Kid Jordan play, and he got one dude, his whole gig is to hit the soundboard of a piano with a rubber hammer. Boom, that's his whole gig. You know what I mean? And then I go to Ellis, and in Ellis, we're sitting there playing through the changes of Giant Steps or Countdown or any of those things, right? So my education from the start was about the diversity of what we have to offer, you know? And that's the thing that I think that troubles our country for the most part. We live in fear of the unknown, you know what I mean? Whereas jazz musicians love the unknown. Cornel West said on my album, man, jazz musicians always step out on nothing expecting something. And that's the way that I like to live my life and encourage other people to live their life, because you're going to learn something from other people. You're going to learn something from other cultures.
I will just jump in and say that the beauty of the way in which you learned, Terence, it came through and it came down and it informed who I am. And I can honestly say that your approach to music education for me was, it was terrible. No, it was everything that I needed. It was everything that I needed. I genuinely believe that I found my compositional voice while studying at the Institute. And the beauty is that that is also the way in which I approach teaching my students, right? And so it's this thing that it kind of continues on. And, you know, when you're in academia, oh my gosh, I have to change my bio. Mama's full professor, okay? Let's get that right. But you're kind of met with resistance because there are certain things in place, like there, I think it's a fear-based thing as well. Like there in lots of institutions, when you go in, first of all, you have to take classical voice lessons. Listen, I don't need to sing no arias to learn technique. And I don't need my students to learn arias to learn technique. Let's get that together right now, first of all. Second of all, there's this like fear of, I mean, it's almost like with regard to private instruction, there's this possessive thing where it's like, you're mine for 4 years, you're mine. And then there's the, oh, you're a classical voice major. No, you cannot sing in the vocal jazz ensemble. That's bad for, there's all these stigmas and all this just BS that I would love for my student. I would be thrilled if a student, I mean, it probably wouldn't look good on me, but I would love it if a student was like, it's been 2 years. These 2 years have been amazing. I would really like to go study with Dr. Blah, 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 because they are really into electronic music and that's the direction I really want to go. In some institutions, it's like, you're not leaving my studio, you are mine until I'm done with you. And really, I think if we can have a curriculum that is, well, genuinely diverse, first of all, which what does that mean? But like if you can have a curriculum that is diverse, which requires intention, then you have to also be able to listen to the students and check out what they're listening to, find out what it is that they're interested in and allow them to flourish, allow them to grow while expressing themselves in the way that they see fit. The issue is that it requires me to then do more work. Because if I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm in my comfort zone, everything's good. It's when my student comes to me and says, I want to write an atonal piano piece. And I'm like, oh Lord, let me call Terence. Because I don't know, but it's my job to figure it out. And I feel like we fail the students when we're not willing to continue our own growth and continue our own learning.
Exactly.
That's interesting that you say that. I just started recently teaching students. I have about, I would say about 10 to 12 private students right now. And I've learned from like last year, just from teaching, that every student is going to be different. You can't, especially with guitar, specifically teaching guitar, it's you gotta figure out where, you know, what their strong suits are. And I think that's just something that I literally didn't know until I started teaching. And I did it. And it's funny because the students also inspire me to go out there and do the research and be like, oh, you want to learn, you know, since, I mean, I'm a jazz musician, but this student, I have one student that, you know, she wants to learn, or her parents are like, she wants to learn like gospel songs, but she's like, oh, I want to learn, you know, these specific gospel songs. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's good for me because I've actually started, I think just 2 year and a half, I started playing at a church seriously. And so that's when I started kind of developing that language. And yeah, it's just really, really cool. I like what Terence said, you know, you got to figure out, you know, your students and where they're at, you know, and especially when you're talking about Lionel Lueki. I mean, I listen to him a lot, and, you know, he has such a unique sound from where he is and his upbringing, you know, that's who he is. And, you know, you can't stifle that. And so I'm learning that when I'm teaching my students and educating my students. It's really cool. I also want to say that my time at Metro, I think it's really cool because Metro has this requirement where if you're a music major, you gotta do at least one world music class. It's either mariachi ensemble, gamelan, or why am I blanking? I mean, Liz, why am I blanking the next one? But being able to
African drumming and dance.
African drumming and dance. And yeah, it's really cool to have that experience. I was in the mariachi ensemble, and I learned guitarrón, I learned vihuela. You know, these are instruments that I didn't even know before I started doing. You know, it's part of the guitar family, but you know, I didn't know about this music, and I would always listen to it, but it was really cool to be able to, you know, kind of dive deep in a semester and really learn this instrument and be a part of this, you know, be a part of like the mariachi ensemble. I also, you know, CU Denver offered a Latin jazz course. And so I spent about 3 or 4 semesters in Voz de la Clave, just learning about Latin rhythms. And, you know, you can't just put Latin on a chart. No one's going to understand what that is. You got to be specific. It's bossa nova, you know, you got, there's just different things that you got to write. You know, I didn't know that. And so it's really cool to be able to, you know, have those different experiences, especially in the jazz program too. It says it's the jazz and American music. So I learned a lot about bluegrass and a lot about folk tunes in America as well. And I didn't know that I was going to kind of like love it so much that I was like, oh man, I love this, learning this different hocketed rhythm on the guitarist, you know, from, you know, Mother Maybelle Carter, and just, you know, all of these people and it's really great to have those different things. And I think it's really important to be open to music in general, because I love music. It's not like I love a specific genre. I love all sorts of music. And I think throughout the years, I always am actively like learning, like I want to learn double bass. I honestly am inspired by like so many musical instruments. I just want to dive in and, you know, just keep creating and learning and learning instruments, because I mean, music is just all that. It's so good, you know, it's in my blood. And yeah, that's all I want to say.
You said something really important, dude. You said that, and it brought me back to when I was 16, 17, and 18, studying with my trumpet teacher in New Orleans. His name was George Jensen. He got me to a certain level of proficiency, right? And then he told me, he said, in order for you to go further, you need to teach. So he got me an elementary school kid that would come to my house every Saturday, and I had to teach this kid from the beginning how to produce a sound and in that process, of teaching him, I was formulating all of those ideas in my mind myself, you know? So when you talk about teaching those kids that you have, that's a great thing to do because it's a shared experience. They're gaining something from it. And as long as you go into it with an open mind and an open heart, you're going to gain a lot from it as well. And it also, it continues into our performing career. And that's the thing that I thought about too, you know, with these operas that I've done. One of the things that's become like extremely apparent in my operas is these African-American voices feel like they have a place to go to be themselves. And I explain that. Most of these guys and women grew up singing in the church. They grew up singing with a certain type of expression. And when they start to sing an Italian aria, the vocal coach says, you can't use that type of vibrato. You can't phrase that way. So they have to turn everything off that inspired them to sing in the first place, right? And here I come with this opera based, and we've been calling them operas and jazz because they're not really jazz operas, but we call them operas and jazz. We're using all of these different languages to try to tell a story. And you should have seen their faces when I said, hey man, bro, we're all like fish out of water. Let's go for it. You know what I mean? I'm not expecting a certain thing. What I'm expecting from you is you to be honest about what you feel about the words you're singing. That's it. Now, however that comes out, I'm good with, you know? And it created this atmosphere where some of these guys at first really started to feel uncomfortable because they felt like their vocal teachers would come to the performance and just like scold them, right? But when they got past that, man, the stuff that they were doing was incredible, you know? And so I think it's not only in the educational part of it, but it's also in us as artists. We get into these situations like, you know, sometimes in the jazz world, we only want to play with people we know we can play with. And it's like, no, why don't you go out there and play with somebody who's going to make you stretch? You know, first time I played with Ed Blackwell and Mal Waldron and Richard Davis, it was Donald Harrison and myself. Man, we were playing with Art Blakey, and with, you know, where you play 3 choruses and you had to stop. That was it. You play 3. Once you hear the horn, the word was once you hear the horn line, you need to stop. So when we figured that we were going to play with those guys, we felt like we were going to be able to stretch. And I'll tell this story. It's a funny story, but it's a true story. So we were stretching. We were playing at Sweet Basil's. And man, and after the show, one night, you know, Ed Blackwell came. He said, man, I want to talk to you 2 guys, because he's from New Orleans too. And he said, you know, you my homies and I love you. He said, but y'all can stretch if you want to. And we were like, damn. We thought we were stretching. You know what I'm saying? So again, it was another instance in my professional career where I could have easily said, man, that ain't me. And gone a different direction and stayed in my little cubby hole. No, but when he said that, I went, wow, it opened my mind up to how limited my thinking was at the time. And I had to be honest about it. Honest. That's the thing that people forget when you're an artist. Be honest. Do not, what do I tell you guys, Johnny, all the time? Do not lie, right? Do not lie to yourself. You can't. If you want to be an artist whose music is going to touch other people, then you got to be honest with yourself to begin with and be open.
Thank you. I think one of the things that is, you know, within all of this setting is that talk about, it's that sort of keyword that that comes up in academic talk right now, that we have to have a growth mindset when we work with students. And I think what's clear is that we also, as you know, educators, have to have our own growth mindset about ourselves, right? About how we approach things. And I think that's so important. I'm going to be very cognizant of time here because we're sort of rounding out that 1.5-hour time period. But I do have one more question that came in. And I wonder if maybe you guys could each sort of address this a little bit, because it's a thinking forward kind of question. Looking at jazz as something that's evolved as this form of protest, outrage, especially as we're talking about it in relation to the Black community, but also really as just a genre that does that so well. I wonder how you all think about this and how you think about directions that we're heading, right? 5 to 10 years from now, where might we be going? What kinds of things are we looking at facing down the line? Or what things would you like to be doing, and how would you like to be presenting yourself moving forward?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'll take a stab, I guess, to jump in. Like, I think, probably for a lot of, people that would call themselves jazz musicians are probably experiencing some different like motivations behind this music now that there's like a social unrest that is going to be driving in a different way. And I guess I think I think that can be really, really beautiful and beneficial for the jazz world, that it could, especially because I guess so many of us go through school and learn it in a technical manner, and this kind of would just take it out of that scope, and just kind of put some real world meaning behind it and some kind of really importance for the people around you and the people that you're trying to lift up and connect with. And I think that sometimes, yeah, okay, I guess in my experience as a sort of jazz musician, that hasn't always been the sort of the forefront of like what we're talking about or working on, and now it feels like it maybe is in a different way. So I think I'm kind of excited about how it could sort of connect jazz music into the community in maybe a different direct way that hasn't done as much in maybe some recent years or in some circles, some communities. And I don't know, I'm really happy to see like so many, from my experience, like these recent years, like in being in New York and being out here, it just feels like a lot of musicians that are into like lots of different types of music coming together and being really open about what the music is going to sound like. And it feels like there's a general sort of desire to not be, adhering to like sort of codes or conventions, but to really just be kind of open to all the influences that the individual musicians are bringing in. And so I don't know, I'm really, I'm sort of excited about this. I mean, this period in jazz that we're in, I think, is really special, and yeah, I'm kind of excited for it coming up. And I guess like we were talking about as panelists before we came on, like I'm hoping that there's this part of where history repeats itself, like after the Spanish flu, that we went into this roaring 20s where everyone like kind of came to life and embraced life and art and music in a new like rejuvenated way. Like I'm really hoping that that's what we're about to go into, and that for those of us that like already know that we love this so much and it's been kind of taken away from us, that like I feel that as like a middle-aged person now. It's like at first I kind of like the break, and now I'm like, I'm really missing playing with people and just want to pick up the horn. I'm feeling kind of sad because it's just me. So and I know talking with friends, everyone is Jones, and to finally be like in a show together and like dance together and not have to be constantly being like, hey, keep your, so I don't know. That's my thing. I hope that we're just at the tip of like a really beautiful new like iceberg of really, important creativity.
Yeah, I kind of feel that because before the pandemic hit, I was playing out way more than usual. I was like sometimes three gigs a week, and that feeling of, I had this regular gig at the Mercury Cafe on Fridays, and it was just with my bassist and the drummer that I did my senior recital with, and every week it just felt it was this community. It's just so good. It's such a great feeling to have live music, especially when you're performing it, being the performer. It kind of just felt like we're getting together and we're gonna have a good time, and play this music. And it's something that I definitely miss. The transition was kind of harsh from going to being out. I wake up at 6 in the morning. I'm out till 10, 11 o'clock at night, five days a week, 6, 7 days a week sometimes. And then having to kind of pump the brakes and just, it kind of opened up, it kind of sparked something in me. It was like, was I going too fast? It was kind of like, all right, like take a chill pill, and that last year it kind of brought this movement in me where it was like, okay, I'm at a point in my musical career where I feel confident enough to perform, and so many opportunities just presented themselves. And I just felt so honored and blessed to be able to do that. Even last year, I mean, I played a gig with Don Clement and Drew Heller, Seth Lewis, and I was just fresh out of school. So that was, they pushed me. That was a real tough gig, but it was so inspiring. I left that gig feeling like it was like something that I didn't know that I needed. And, you know, being around musicians that are better than you is such a blessing, I would say. Just because I'm able to learn from them and just being in their presence and their energy is so powerful. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I totally agree. I feel like it's happening, you know, as we speak, this revolution or this change in the appreciation of the arts. I feel like, especially, you know, music. People are going to come back to this, like, you know, loving. They miss music so much. I miss music so much. Everyone's going to come back, and I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. And I was going to also say, that just being able to, I don't know, I lost it right here. Anyway, it'll pop up in my head when it comes back. But anyway, yeah, I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. Just in the next years, just music is going to change so much, and it's going to be very powerful to a lot of people.
Yeah, what excites me the most about where we are right now, I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic because I've really been on a very large, slow moving struggle bus with everything that's been going on in the world. But there's something freeing in all of this for me, and it's that I feel like artists are going to give themselves permission to do whatever the hell they want. That's what's going to happen. And I think that it's going to be such a beautiful thing for the world. Just like, I mean, because there's so much questioning. Why did you write this? Why are you playing this? Why are you talking about this on stage? Now the answer to everything is why not? Are you kidding me? We done been through the ringer. Okay, so we have permission to say anything that we want with our art, with the magic that we're attempting to create. And I do believe that there's this pendulum and it kind of does this thing. And I am thrilled at the new wave that is coming our way. I really believe in it. And it's really one of the only things that gets me through. Like, you wind up being hopeless and then just like kind of finding the space. I'm really into meditation. So like finding the space that like, okay, this is coming through. This is a cycle. We're going to make our way out the other end. And so I'm just going to keep putting as much positive energy into the world. What's good for me is good for the world. There is a change that's coming. And I think it will be unapologetically honest, real, and incredibly beautiful.
You know, the thing that I always have an issue with that question is that I think there's just an inherent problem in asking the question itself, because you might set yourself up to disregard something that doesn't fit the answer, you know? And one of the things that I've always tried to do as an artist, and the thing that I get excited about, is the same thing that I think we need to do as a society, is accept all of the things, all of the strengths that different people bring to any musical situation. And some of us, we don't know what those things are. Imam talked about learning those new instruments. You know, I've seen people come up to me with musical ideas from different parts of the world that I wasn't aware of, and I'm just totally floored. It's not anything that I can perceive of. It's not anything that I can think of down the road and say that that is coming this way. Who could perceive of John Coltrane? Who could perceive of Ornette Coleman, after listening to Coleman Hawkins and Charlie Parker? You know what I mean? Just to give you a couple of examples. And it's the reason why when those personalities showed up and just did not adhere to the norm, they were initially rejected. And I think what we need to learn how to do is embrace the diversity of thought, because then I think it can carry over into society and help us embrace what somebody else is bringing to our culture, and not just automatically say, no, this is who we are. No, this is who we are at this moment, but we all have the capacity to grow and become something much more than this, and we have to be willing to deal with the unknown and be comfortable sitting in that. That is the fascination of this journey of life for me. I used to always get depressed when I would hear people say, by the time I'm 30, I need to have this. By the time I'm 40, I need to have this. Trying to plan out that, to me, that was just not exciting at all. The whole thing that's exciting about life is finding those things that you couldn't perceive of, the unknown projects that come your way that really help you blossom and go in different directions. If you would have asked me, if somebody would have asked me years ago, hey man, do you want to write an opera? I would have said, hell no. If they would have asked me, did I want to write music for movies? I'd have been, hell no, because I was trying to be Miles Davis, But the thing about it all is that when those things present themselves to me, I go, wow, that's an interesting challenge to figure out how to put these notes and tones together to create musical statements, So the thing that I caution all of us to do, in the coming near future is just to be open to whatever is coming our way, because we're not going to be able to perceive it all. It's probably going to be something that you sit there and go, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? And if you give it a chance, you probably say, wow, these guys put a lot of thought into that. There's something there, as opposed to just automatically dismissing it because it doesn't fit into the narrative of what you perceive the future to be. So it's a touchy thing with me when we talk about those things, because when I was younger, I would always try to answer that question, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And it was none of that stuff. It was none of it. And the thing that I've learned is it's never going to be any of it. Whatever we perceive, it's not going to be that. It's going to be, because there's somebody sitting around someplace practicing on some stuff we can't even perceive of. And that little kid is going to come around, he or she is going to present some music, and we're going to be like, damn. You know what I mean? Because, the artists that are honest, we're going to be like, damn, because we're going to sit as man, I didn't think of that. Ambrose Akinmusiri was one of my students at the Monk Institute. Don't you think I did that every time I gave him a trumpet lesson? Every time he would play something, I'd be like, damn, bro, how you come up? Really? Wow. What am I supposed to do? Say, hey, man, you need to play more like Clifford Brown? No. I love the fact that he has his own mind and has a brilliant mind and thinking about music in a way that's like inspiring me to think about these notes differently. Because all too often and that's the thing about life, we tend to look at things in a limiting fashion. We look at these 12 notes in the chromatic scale and say, this is all that there is. And that is BS. No, it's all that your mind is thinking about. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing that always scares me about my own existence in life. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person that becomes landlocked in a certain thing of thinking. I just don't. When I was growing up with the guys that I grew up with, we used to have a saying, man, if you ever see me up there doing some BS, bro, just walk on stage and slap the shit out of me and just walk off. I'll know exactly what it's about. You don't have to say anything. You know what I mean? Because we all just want to constantly grow and be better people, man, and be better musicians. Life's too short. Life's too short to be tripping about it. And let me just tell us one story. I know Jeanette doesn't want me to tell this story. But I have to.
Then don't. You don't have to.
Yeah, no, I do. I have to tell a story because, when she was talking about connecting to music, you know, when she was talking, because you made me think about it when you said you were writing about boys and all of those other things. You remember the song that you wrote? You know the song I'm talking about?
You had quite a lot of songs, sir.
I know, but there was one thing where you were dealing with something personal in your life and you didn't want to put it out there because it was too emotional. And I said, no, you need to write this to get it out of your system, right? You remember that? And she wrote the song. It was a beautiful song. And when she came in and played it for me in the lesson, she got emotional and cried. But here's the most important thing about it. Come on. Here's the most important thing about that is that came from such a place of honesty. When she performed it on the stage with the band, people fell all over the song. And and to me, that's what music and being an artist is supposed to be about. We are displaying our guts to the world, right? And Alvin Baptiste, a great jazz musician here in New Orleans, made me realize something. He said, the easiest thing to do is to play like John Coltrane or to play like Clifford Brown and Miles Davis because you know people already love them. The hardest thing to do is to dig down deep in your soul and bear it to the world, right? For it possibly to be rejected. But people, I don't know. That's a scary thing for a lot of people. But the thing that you have to embrace is that honesty is going to resonate with somebody. It's going to find its audience. And that's where you have to live as an artist and don't run away from that. Sorry, Johnny. Do you remember that song now? Do you remember the song I'm talking about?
I feel like I felt that way about every song I wrote.
No, I know I don't want to give it away, but I remember the song.
Well, text me. Tell me what it is. I need to know.
All right. Yeah.
Man, this has been so great, and it's so nice to see all of you. And Terence, thank you for sharing all this wisdom. Like, you're such a deep thinker, and you've always been sort of one of my heroes in the music. I think one of the just true heroes in the music. It's been just so enlightening just to hear you really talk like this. Thank you for being so honest in this format. It was really inspiring.
Well, you guys inspire me too, man. And that's the thing. You know, we have to inspire each other. And I thank you for saying that. But listen, me sitting here listening to you guys, I'm getting worked up. I'm getting hopeful. I'm getting excited about the future. So thank you too.
I just want to thank you all so much. It's been such a privilege doing this. And I say this every time we do one of these, but now it's the strange moment where we all turn our computers off and I'm still sitting at my dining room table. We can't go out and have a drink. So,
right, I know. Isn't that a drag? Yeah. Because if we were on a panel, there'd be a bar someplace we would find right about now, right after this show. Right. Whether you're drinking seltzer water or whatever's your drink of choice.
Maybe Mardi Gras 2022 is where we're all at.
There you go. Bon temps roulé.
I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to Terence. Thank you to Shane, Eman, Jonay, to Jeremy, who's behind the scenes, to Peter and Don for showing up, to our Office of Diversity and Inclusion for helping bring this to music, to Charlotte and Christine and Elaine and everyone who's back in our office helping out. And I just want to put a small plug that we do have. I put the links in the chat. Our jazz festival, jazz celebration is continuing this week. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. we have Anisha Rush featuring Jafoki and the Anisha Rush Quartet. At 7 p.m., 8 p.m. we have Stage, a virtual performance of Stage. And then on Friday evening we have the Monique Brooks Roberts Quartet in a virtual concert. And Michael Mayo is going to be doing a solo set also. So we are packed in there. And coming up in my Music, Race, and Social Justice series, we have hopefully, I'm just waiting to secure it, March 15th or 16th will be the Resistance Revival Chorus joining us to talk about their work. On Thursday or on Wednesday, March 31st, we're going to be joined by Dr. Joyce McCall, music educator, talking about music ed, race in the classroom. And then closing out the series probably will be Thursday, April 15th, 4 p.m. with Filipinx DJ Cutting Candy. So we are thrilled to have you all here today. I just want to thank you. I'll give you my round of applause now.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for joining us.
Everybody.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks.
All right, guys. See you guys later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Terence. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay warm.
Yeah.
you all you guys. Thanks for joining us. This has been really wonderful.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, it's been a really long time since I've gotten to like talk music with Terence, and just hearing him, you know, tonight was like everything. So, but yeah, thanks guys. This is great.
Thank you. No, thank you, Michael.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again, but in person. I'll fly out to Denver.
There we go.
I'll be in the audience next time.
Thank you guys. Love you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks guys.
Thank you. See you guys.
See ya.